Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go! Hey, I'm a new Reddit member, but I've been listening to stories for months on YouTube. I hope this story fits this category and provides some entertainment and not an arrest warrant. It's a long one, but here goes. Intro. This took place after 9 to 10 years ago after a work-related back injury. I was on workers' comp and had a ton of free time and severe back pain. I decided to give cannabis a try for the first time in several years. I live in California and it was legal to use pot here with a doctor's recommendation. Right before all of this, I moved into a cheap little apartment in a not-so-great part of the city. I was naive and didn't realize that I was surrounded by meth addicts. I'm a musician and one of my neighbors was a fellow guitarist, Tim. We bonded pretty quickly over music and smoking pot. Things were going fine with my new place until our landlord, Cindy, got into a huge blowout with Tim over their illegal weed growing operation. Those idiots were growing hundreds of plants in the empty units without any permits or the consent of the owner. I don't know what really happened between them because the stories kept changing, but the fight was basically over money. Cindy was a woman in her 50s, but turned into a junior high school bully and set out to turn everyone against him. She first tried to get me on her side by giving me copious amounts of pot. When that didn't work, she started vandalizing my property and framed Tim for it. I became furious at him and confronted him about what was happening. We got into a huge shouting match and he called me someone who has never used a drug in her life, unless you count pot a meth head. His insult was especially ridiculous because he was an active meth user. After that incident, Tim would bang on my front door at all hours of the night, would yell racist slurs and insult me and even tried to kick my puppy. The final straw was when he ran up to me while I was outside and threw a huge bucket of hot water on me, my puppy, and my phone. My dog was fine, and after placing my phone in a bag of uncooked rice, it was fine too. I, on the other hand, was beyond livid. The revenge. I talked to a friend, Chris, about what was going on at my place, and we concocted a plan. Since Cindy wanted me on her side, she gave me lots of information about Tim, including his cell number, which I gave to Chris. He started calling Tim several times a day. Chris also started parking his car in visible places near the apartment complex. I began talking to the other neighbors and fed them information about mysterious cars and people watching the apartment complex. I knew the information would give back to Tim without me having to do very much. Tim became more and more paranoid and got to the point that he finally asked me, of all people, if I had noticed anything strange. I said I had been seeing a strange car nearby with people just watching his apartment. He tried to give a fake apology and asked me to let him know if I saw anything. As a good neighbor, of course, I agreed. He said he didn't know if it was a cops or a gang following and watching him. I shrugged as if I didn't know. After about 2 weeks of Chris volunteering his free time to help me with my revenge, it all came to a head. One day, Tim hopped into his car and started driving. I was on the phone with Chris as he gave me the play-by-play. Tim tried to lose Chris by turning into a grocery store parking lot down the street. Chris jumped out of his car and fired the gun into the air several times, and all hell broke loose. I had no idea he even carried a gun. Chris then chased him a few miles down the road until I was finally able to get him to stop and go home. I was worried he'd be arrested, so I called everything off. But it didn't matter at this point. Tim was now convinced that they were trying to kill him or somehow steal his pot-growing operation. A couple of days later, Cindy asked if I was interested in moving into Tim's apartment, which was slightly bigger than mine. I asked what was going on and she told me that Tim was moving out of state and that she was getting rid of their growing operation as soon as possible. By this time, I found out that she had been responsible for starting the fight between Tim and I. I was already looking for another place to live, so I declined and instead found the phone numbers for the complex owner and his son. I told him everything about the grow rooms. I also called the power company to let them know about the illegal power usage for the empty units. I am not sure what happened with the power company, but when I called to inquire about an available apartment a few months later, I found out that the new landlord was one of my old neighbors. Cindy still lived in the complex, but was no longer in charge. My ending. I settled my workers' comp case a few weeks later and moved on. Although this was a very turbulent but short time in my life, it taught me many valuable lessons. If you have any questions, feel free to ask and I will answer. Thanks for listening. Context: I'm on a swim team and swim pretty regularly, so I know most of the people on the team. So one day I was at practice doing my set and this girl that I know pretty well is going the other way and I accidentally hit her chest. So I stopped and apologized, and I thought it was over. But boy, was I wrong. Half an hour later, I get out of the pool and grab my towel as this entitled mother, Karen, charges towards me.
How dare you touch my daughter, you pervert?
What? I was just swimming and accidentally…
Liar!
She says while winding up for a punch. And the punch hits, but feels like feathers. So now I'm pretty angry and boy do I want to punch this lady. People were looking and I saw one on the security phone for the county college. That's where I swim, by the way. And eventually 2 actual cops showed up with pistols and handcuffs ready. By the way, tasers are illegal in New Jersey.
Finally, someone has arrived to arrest this pervert.
One of the 2 cops then tells her, "We have reports of you hitting this boy. That's an assault on a minor. I was 10 in this story. That's jail time for you."
But he hit my daughter and I want to press charges.
The other cop asks, "Was it deliberate?" I answer him with, "No." But then Karen gets mad and pushes me into the pool and onto the lane line. It really hurt, by the way. I blacked out, but I learned later that she was charged with 2 counts of assault on a minor and got her arrested immediately. Justice served. We don't own a car and we live at the end of a cul-de-sac. I have people use my driveway all the time to turn around. It is not a huge deal to me. A little annoying when they compact the snow and it's harder to shovel, but whatever. One of my neighbors had a ride service come pick up their child every day. The van would park in my spot and begin honking at like 8 a.m. I worked nights at the time. Half the time he'd be half parked on my grass. I told my neighbor that I don't overly mind my spot being used, and especially not if he's going to drive over what little lawn I have every time. She spoke with him, and he ignored her. I spoke with him and got,
"What's your problem, man? It's not like you're using it."
To which I repeated that I don't mind him using it if he stays off my grass and doesn't honk every morning. Apparently suggesting he wait till the kid notices he's there or, God forbid, he has to drag himself out of the car to knock on a door was just ridiculous and inhumane of me. So I left a recycle bin at the foot of my driveway, and he just ran over it. I called a dispatch for the ride service. I was told they are subcontractors and technically self-employed, but they will pass along the message. I woke up the next day to pounding on my door. The dude is mad.
"How dare you call my boss, you stupid piece of crap? What is wrong with you?"
Well, it's quite simple. You were told not to use my driveway if you were going to drive on my lawn and wake me up every morning. Now get off my doorstep.
"I will sue you if I lose my job because of you."
You've been warned. Don't trespass on my driveway or property again. Dude storms off in a huff, spouting obscenities and so on. So this happened on a Thursday. The kids have a PD day the next day and it's supposed to be one of those delightful Canadian weekends where it drops to like -40°C. For my American friends, -40 is where Celsius and Fahrenheit meet up, so it's freaking cold. So that night I grabbed one of my more beat-up plastic garbage bins, made sure to plug all the holes with a generous amount of duct tape, stuck a sign on it that read, private property, driveway not for public use, and proceeded to fill it to the brim with water. Now, before anyone thinks I'm a jerk willing to potentially endanger the other kids in a car, I would like to point out that my neighbor's kid is the first to be picked up, so it's just him in the car. Cue Monday morning. He sees a garbage can, packs up a bit more, and defiantly charges the garbage can as if to teach me a lesson. And he proceeds to cause some pretty serious damage to the front end of his car. Dude gets out fuming, calls the cops and comes pounding on my door, screaming about how I'm going to buy him a new car and that I'm about to be arrested. The cops arrive, and one of them asks him, "So let me make sure I understand this situation. He asked you not to park here if you could refrain from honking, then warned you not to park here and put up a barrier. And now you expect him to be charged and pay for damages you caused yourself to your vehicle in an attempt to destroy his own personal property?" I will never forget the look on his face when the officer said, "Yeah, that's not how it works." And then he turned to me and asked if I wanted to pursue charges for him damaging my personal property. I just gave him the biggest grin I could muster and said, "Nah, I think we're good." I then went back inside to enjoy a morning coffee while watching him from my kitchen window as he paced back and forth in the cold waiting for a tow truck and having to call the company he worked for to explain why they needed to send out another driver to complete his route. Edit for closure. No, I never saw him again. As far as a police officer, I wasn't aware that it wasn't up to me, and he didn't say anything about it either. I assume he really didn't want to have to bother with the paperwork and thought I may have gotten upset if he'd said, "Well, I don't see the need to press charges at this point." So he made it seem like it was my choice. Source? I'm somewhat lazy and would likely do the same. A cul-de-sac can also be used to describe a street with no exit, which is exactly where my home is. It is easier for them to use my driveway than a three-point turn their way out like Austin Powers. I was drinking morning coffee because they were 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. shifts, so nights but not quite overnights, and I usually got up around 10 a.m. Every time he'd wake me up around 8 or so, I wouldn't be able to get back to sleep, hence why I needed him to stop. Just flipping through a few stories and reading about entitled drivers getting their just desserts. This made me think back to my days as a paramedic. We got a call to a house where there was a pediatric patient who had fallen. The patient was morbidly obese and weighed around 30 stone, 420 pounds. This story isn't really about them though. There are many reasons people get to this size, and I've never judged, only helped. No, the problem here was a really arrogant neighbor we had come across before. And boy, was this guy a judgmental jerk. Our patient had a car and had a disabled parking permit. They also had a council-designated disabled parking spot outside their home, which the neighbor kept parking in. There have been a number of letters from the council regarding this, and a number of parking fines just served to annoy this chap even more. On the day of the story, I took the call that the patient had fallen and we went to the house. Sure enough, the neighbor was not only parked in a disabled spot, but had parked a second car blocking access to the patient's driveway. I assessed the patient and suspected they had a broken hip, so needed to go in. I sent my colleague round to the neighbor to ask them to move the cars, and when they came back I was told the neighbor had just told my colleague to do one. No problem. Time to get the message home. I radioed through to our control center and asked for the fire service and police. We needed the fire service to help lift the guy and the police to do a little parking control. The fire service were the first to arrive and I spoke to the crew commander to let them know what the situation was. Firemen went to the house to ask the neighbor to move the car and was told the same as my colleague. The message was relayed back and the watch commander just asked me one question: is the patient's life at risk? And I knew exactly where this was going. And it was time our thoughtless neighbor got the message. My answer was yes. There is equipment I need to get into this house and the driveway is blocked preventing me to do so. The watch commander told the fire truck driver to move these vehicles. It was really satisfying to see both vehicles being pushed down the road by the fire service, and the look on the neighbor's face as he came out spitting and screaming was well worth seeing. His complaints to the police were basically soundless, since nobody gave him any attention. They were well aware of his history of obstruction, and my clinical assessment that the patient's life was in danger was more than enough justification for the vehicles to be moved. I doubt it made our patients' lives any easier, but it really did bring a smile to their face as we wheeled them out. Bit of backstory: in 2015, I fought in a charity boxing event for cancer research and had a really good time, and got to know a few of the people from the sessions quite well. The training was split between upstairs and down. As you trained with someone you'd fight on the show, so they separated us to keep it a bit more mysterious or something. As these events attract mainly males, it was a pleasant surprise to see a few girls in with the mix. But I was there to train, so other than some friendly chats, I wasn't too interested. But I had noticed a girl that was very above average from the rest of the few girls. Pre-fights and after, there was a compulsory medical check for concussion, and so on. Behind me in the queue was the girl I mentioned before, so I asked her how she got on in her fight, and she invited me out for a drink at an after party. I gladly accepted. I was amazed to see her dressed up. Turns out we had a lot in common, like fitness and many other things, so we started a relationship almost straight away. This went well for about 6 months. She met my family and my son, so all was shaping up to be something long-lasting, as we got along like we had known each other for years. And I suspected nothing was wrong. She had aspirations to be an Instagram model, and she got a free photo shoot down in London. Free shot pressured into buying the photos, yada yada. But she wanted the experience, and I have family in London, so we figured why not. The drive there was pretty good. Anyways, later in the evening she starts to play on her phone, but I think nothing of it. I had no reason not to trust her. Day of the shoot, we leave the hotel, and I buy the train tickets to the center, and she's all excited. She leaves me in the waiting area with her phone, and I'm just sat chilling when her phone buzzes. I checked to see if it was anything important, and a man's name was a love heart is on screen. Curiosity gets the better of me, and I had a snoops. Turns out she's still very much in love with her ex and tells him several times in messages if he ever wants her back, she will be there instantly for him. She gets a break, and I tell her I'm nipping to get some food and so on. Absolutely fuming but keeping a poker face. I walked out the studio, train tickets and car keys in hand, headed home, locked her, and never spoke to her again. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.